Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Carter Wells. I am fortunate to lead the economic development group here at HudsonAlpha and work on the mission area that is the driver of this panel tonight. We have been celebrating our 15th anniversary for HudsonAlpha over these last couple of months. But the thing about the associate companies really started a few months before the grand opening. So in October of 2007, you will see, possibly, I can't see it, but there should be a picture of Mr. McMillan and Jim Hudson and others as they are cutting the ribbon to this building and to the south wing of this building. So before we got to 2008, we were already working here at HudsonAlpha with the associate companies. And so we're a little bit on the leading edge of even HudsonAlpha, especially with the panelists that we have tonight. So when we started, there was a few companies and a few research labs, and today we've got a little over 1,100 people on this campus. So when many of us were here at the start, there was plenty of room to move around and set up shop, and you had a nice big office, or you had plenty of space to work in. But now this building is full, and we'll talk about some of the other the growth of the campus and some of the companies that are here. And then also we've got people that have come either from very close by in the neighborhood or also driven up a handful of hours to be here. And so Cynthia Crutchfield from Innovate Alabama, thank you very much for being here. Lots of good things going on with Innovate Alabama, and aside from your presence here today, thank you for the announcement earlier today. For those that are not aware, Innovate Alabama has been working with small companies around the state, and today was the second round of SBIR supplemental awards for a lot of small companies, and they were across the state, which exactly the way it should be with a good statewide presence. But then there were many from Huntsville, and there were 3 that are HudsonAlpha companies. And so very happy about that, and thank you again for what you're doing on that front. Miller Gervin, who's back here a little bit, she's working like it's Sunday, and she's starting in the back row and not coming up too close. But Miller leads the innovation work at the Economic Development Partnership of Alabama, and she's been a principal driver in the things that are happening across the innovation front in the state. And and then with the Alabama Launchpad program that's run through EDPA, lots of good things are happening with Miller and her group and EDPA in general. We also have, I think I've seen a handful of the HudsonAlpha's associate companies that are represented here. Lisa Chen, I see from Biodynamic, who's back here. I thought Michael and Michelle Banish from Polaris are here, I think, and then others. And then also one of our sponsors, Trigon Cyber, and I think is she? Oh, I'm sorry, right in front of me. I'm looking back at Miller, and I'm sorry about that. But thank you very much for you being here and for what you are doing at HudsonAlpha, but then also what you're doing for the 15th anniversary. We also are recording this tonight for the Economic Developments Group, a new podcast, From Idea to Action, and that From Idea to Action, Stories from Alabama Innovators. And that's a new podcast that we started last month, and it's been, we've really been overwhelmed with some of the response and the conversations that have happened after we started this. So please, I think we'll have this basically in 2 segments, but then we'll also, who's coming in? Sorry, I'm getting waved up here, sorry about that. But the podcast is, we started this really to connect people that are driving innovation across the state. The first guest was Troy Fountain from the Wiregrass Foundation in Dothan. And the second guest, and you'll hear from her a little bit, with Peggy Salmon from Gene Capture. And then others you'll have over the next few months, whether that is Josh Clevenger from HudsonAlpha or Greg Barker from EDPA and others. So that's something that is going to be people that are driving innovation and doing the technology work, but then also people that are supporting innovation across the state, as well as the policymakers and the people that are putting things together to make a good environment for innovation in the state. A big goal as well is to make sure that we are connecting across the state, whether we have Huntsville and Dothan or Huntsville and Birmingham and Mobile, whatever it may be. We are still in a small state of 5 million people, and we've got plenty of opportunities to work together, and we should do that more. From the folks here in North Alabama, it's on us to make sure that we are reaching out further south, and hopefully it's going back and forth as well. But it has been for years. We just want to strengthen that larger Alabama ecosystem for innovation. With that, let me turn the page and let me introduce the two guys that are on my left. I've known both of them for years, and they've been good friends as well as great people to lean on and ask for advice, and they've done this with many more associate companies and people at HudsonAlpha, many more than myself. Rob Seitz, who's just to my immediate left, and then Marshall Schroeder, who is to Rob's left. Both were here, as I said a minute ago, both were here when the building opened, when this building opened. Rob was the co-founder of Applied Genomics, and he'll tell his story in a few minutes, and he was second floor south, I think. Mm-hmm. And then Marshall Schroeder was here when I first started walking through the building, and there was scaffolding right here, and he and his co-founder were in the dark room that's right over here on the south side at about 230 square feet, something like that, roughly. Yep. And we'll talk about, he's got a little bit bigger space these days and more in the future for him. Rob worked at Research Genetics with Jim Hudson and co-founded Applied Genomics with his business partner, Doug Ross, and they went through 2 acquisitions, and he's now he works at Oncocyte, and he is still heavily involved in both the business and the research side. And then I think we've got a picture of his team from days gone by. I've told you I found some old pictures. And it's Rod Beck, who was one of the lab directors for him at Applied Genomics. And now he's a lab director with Marshall at Discovery. So again, we've kept talented people here over the years, which has been very, very good. Mm-hmm. And then Marshall Schroeder comes to HudsonAlpha and to the biosciences world from a different pathway. He is an investment banker and comes from the world of finance, and then decided to start a company here in Huntsville, and got a really interesting story to tell. And they've gone through, I'll say, a handful of acquisitions and mergers over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm not sure if I can do it all in one, or at least both hands, maybe,
2 hands.
Or at least with 3 hands. I might need to bring out the toes as well. But Marshall has been a key part of HudsonAlpha and growing the campus much beyond just his work at Conversant and now at Discovery with his co-founder, Luke Doran. So with that, don't know if that's me. I don't think it's me. And don't worry, we've got emergency exits on either side, and we'll let you know if they need to go. But so let me start with Rob. Tell us a little bit about your path and then how you got to HudsonAlpha, if you don't mind.
Sure. As you mentioned, I worked with Jim Hudson. I worked for him for about 7 years, and walked into him one day and said, you're the best boss I could ever have, but I want my own company. I want to be my own boss. And anybody who knows Jim will not be surprised that his answer was, great, I'm going to help you do it, but we're going to do it right. And so a couple months pass, and he walks in with a email from a major researcher at Stanford, the first person who was ever doing really large-scale gene expression. And he says, this guy wants to do a collaboration with us, but I think this can be your new company instead. Get on a plane and go out there tonight. So I got on a plane, went out there. Turns out the guy that I was supposed to meet with got called away. He couldn't meet. And so they were sort of stuck with what to do with the guy from Alabama. And eventually they called the nicest guy in the lab, who was a little grumpy that he had to babysit the guy from Alabama. He came down and he and I started talking, and he goes, "Hey, and what do you want to do with this?" I said, "I want to start my own business." And he goes, "Oh, that's great." And I said, "And I want you to be my business partner." And he goes, "You are crazy." Took me 2 years, but I finally convinced Doug Ross that we were going to jump ship together and start Applied Genomics. And the basis of the business was to take all of that information, this very extremely sophisticated data, and do what you would just call in patent language, reduce it to practice. We ended up coming up with a set of antibodies which were already accepted in labs. Every lab has a way, any pathology lab has a way of running them. We made over 2,000 of those. They were all evaluated by Rod Beck. Of those 2,000, pretty much 1,920 were garbage, but the remaining 80 were extremely good and extremely high quality.
So the failure rate really still bothers you after
Not really.
this many years? Okay.
Actually, no, I'm actually proud of the
okay.
failure rate. I'm actually proud of that failure rate.
It's,
it meant
the
that we
Edison quote of, yes, I know 10,000 ways not to build a light bulb.
Because I was disappointed at first, but I learned the rule that the moment you have to talk yourself into it working is the moment you know it's not working. And so, the cream really rose. And so we continued to work. We had a 5-year plan, but through maximum efficiency, we turned it into a 9-year plan. And then finally, Clariant came calling, which was a California-based company, and we ended up getting acquired by them. And I've had 3 bosses that I really remember in my life: Jim Hudson, myself, and Ronnie Andrews. And I can tell you the other 2 are far better than me, okay? So I ended up in a great situation. They bought us. They were great to us. I remember Doug saying to me a couple of months later, he goes, "They know we didn't buy them, right? They know they bought us," because they really took us along. A year and a day later, we were bought by GE Healthcare. It turns out that GE, who we'd been kind of collaborating with, knew about all of our products, and we had gotten on an acquisition list with GE. Clariant was on a different list. Right at the moment, one group's getting ready to approach Clariant, and another group's getting ready to approach AGI, we announced the merger, and they just sort of said, "Well, let's just give this 6 months and see how this works." And after 6 months, they said, "It looks like it's working great. Let's go get them all." They ended up paying a much bigger price tag once we were together, but they were GE Healthcare, so their definition of a big price tag and ours is is a little different. They were not worried about it. They felt they were getting a much more proven model this way. And so a year and a day later, we were bought. We stayed another year and a half. Since that time, I've never stopped working with Ronnie and Doug, but I also got very involved with a company up in Nashville. They ended up with we ended up with a product that I'm very proud of. And when I was looking for buyers, I went to the company that Ronnie and Doug were now at, and we ended up creating a merger and pulling that product into them. So that's actually Oncocyte. Yeah. Ronnie was CEO of Oncocyte, and Doug was Chief Scientific Officer. And
as I look back and know a little bit about your history, it is the relationships that you've built along the way. Some here, some in Huntsville, some elsewhere, but I know the Ronnie and the Doug and the Jim pieces kind of thread through all most of it. And again, that's kind of what we're trying to do at HudsonAlpha. Well, it is what we're trying to do at HudsonAlpha, is kind of build that ecosystem, build those relationships that can be very beneficial in the near term, but then also downstream. So very much so, very good. And just one last thing, back to the AGI. You're talking about the things you were doing. You were one of the first companies to actually take those the data that you're finding in genomics generally, and moving those into clinical practice. And that was something that was really not happening at that point.
That's right.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. Okay, let me turn to Marshall.
What's the question?
Let me think. I'll start very similarly, but with you, like I said, you came through a different pathway on the finance side. Yeah. You and Luke Doran, your co-founder, were both in Charlotte, at the time working, I guess, as analyst for M&A and
Yeah,
things like that, and then
So
I'm ready to jump ship.
Yeah,
and-
completely
okay.
different path. So I guess as a background, I've always, my father's a physician, Luke's father's a physician. You'll find we're kind of similar backgrounds. Oldest of 4 kids, both went to college thinking this is our path, is in medicine. Met in biology class. And then biology class, we decided this isn't what we think we want to do. And so went a different route, but it was interesting ever since that early freshman year in college, we said, wouldn't it be fun to start a business in science and in healthcare? Had an opportunity to do investment banking and private equity in Charlotte and always in healthcare. And about every, and we were roommates in college and roommates in Charlotte. And we, every often we'd say, okay, what idea would make us jump ship? And we threw a lot of bad ideas at the wall, and one finally stuck. And we were at a point in life where we felt like we had a little more, risk tolerance. And so we said, listen, now's the time. If we're ever going to do it, let's jump ship, and we can try to figure it out. And so that idea was around trying to create a commercial biobank for research. And you say, like, how did we connect those dots from banking to a biobank, and what is a biobank? So I guess backing up, researchers need access to biospecimens in order to understand the biology of disease. And so, for instance, AGI, to test those 2,000 antibodies, they had to go and find biospecimens, tissues, to do the testing. They had to understand, okay, how was that test, how were those antibodies predictive of what disease and what outcome for a patient for a certain drug. And so, but to go and get the biospecimens and to go get the clinical data, sorry, I'm getting a little feedback, was a real challenge. And so at that time, this was a bottleneck for researchers. You couldn't get access to patient, well annotated biospecimens with the appropriate regulatory consent. So patients had said, yes, we will donate this for research. So we thought, hey, this is going to be an easy business. Wouldn't this be fun to build a business where we saw a need and it connected the dots from some of our healthcare worlds. Little did we know it was a lot harder than we ever thought. We'd actually never met a client, a customer, a researcher. A lot of this was computer research. We'd worked with the companies and some of the management teams, but we had not actually worked with the research scientists. And so, but it was, those are some of the most fun days, right? You're just figuring it out. And, my wife calling me and saying, what are you doing? It's Friday night at 10 o'clock. And I said, I'm under a hood pipetting blood samples. And she's like, what are you doing? But that was, we built that business. It started with 2 of us, and we've grown it really since 2006 to now. A fun part of that journey was actually Rob and his business. So before HudsonAlpha, we were in a building on Odyssey, and there were 4 companies there. Well, there were 3 companies there originally. Okay. Rob's is one of those, and Brian Pollock and Troy Moore's business, Open Biosystems, was another. And we got to meet Brian and Troy, and they really, I can talk more and more about that, but they really took us under their wing. And as part of that, they said, listen, there's a conference room over here, right? Why don't y'all just come, sit over here, and you just, you can build your business here. Little did I know that was Rob's conference room, okay? And so we thought it was great, right? So we had a free place to work, and that was actually our second office, our first real office, but that was a great opportunity to kind of maybe taste a little bit of what HudsonAlpha has become, where you have multiple companies and scientists in the same building, learning from each other, supporting each other, and really helping each other grow. And so we got to see that kind of at the genesis, I think.
So was it who gets there first in the morning gets the conference room? Is that
No,
how did that work?
We just moved in.
Okay.
Took over, yes.
Squatters' rights?
Yeah,
So-
no, I'm preparing my claim as to own part of Discovery now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Hey, you can get away with that. That's fantastic. It's a good time for that.
Yeah. So we, but it's been a fun journey, and along the way, got to meet Jim Hudson, and Jim said, "Hey, we're building this new building." And we're like, "Oh, that's great because this conference room's really, dark and tiny." But it's been fun seeing HudsonAlpha grow and being a part of that growth over the last 15 years. So.
But it's interesting that y'all were, Jim said, okay, yes, I want you to start it. We're going to do it right. You got Brian Pollock and Troy Moore, who were co-workers for a time with y'all. They started Open Biosystems, and so they had just the heady triumvirate of Jim Hudson, Lonnie McMillan, and Mark Smith as their people to mentor and to advise. And that same type of thing with the little spot over on Odyssey Drive and then moving over here. It's just, again, this thread of people helping other people that want to do cool things and innovative things.
I think that's one of the things that really surprised me about Huntsville. I mean, I'm a native. I grew up here, and your perspective changes when you're 0 to 18, and then you move back and you're trying to, start a business and so forth, and your perspective continues to change as you grow older and appreciate things more. But one of the things that's amazed me about Huntsville and this community is how supportive it is. Okay, of other companies, of each other. Time and time again, whether it was, Rob or Brian and Troy, Lonnie, Jim, Mark, and you go down the line where people would reach out and you'd meet them or people you knew and they're saying, listen, what can I do to help you? That's very different from the banking world, right? So I was used to a more sharp-elbowed type of environment. I mean, I remember when Jim said, would you like to be a part of the building? I said, sure. Can we put that in writing? And so he said, I guess so. And so I drafted up a one page. I said, and I was like, can you please sign that? Now, knowing Jim, I'd never do that, but it's a world I lived in, and I really love that conference room, right? But we needed some more growth space, absolutely.
And I think of the pictures I pulled out was here's you and Greg Tyree, pen in hand signing the lease. Yeah. It was probably the second lease at that point of your, a dozen that we've signed over the years. But yeah, there's a much younger Marshall and Greg Tyree, who is the operations director here.
It's amazing.
Signing one of many leases for Conversant/Discovery and moving forward.
How much thinner we were and how much more hair we had, or how dark his hair was.
It's true. That's true. Yeah.
So.
On that, you mentioned perspective and maybe dark versus gray at this point. The challenges of the first 5 years of getting going as Conversant and pedaling as fast as you can to keep things moving, to go from the 2 people in that conference room, in that room, to 70 or so, compared to the challenges of post-merger the last 5 years.
Sure.
What's the difference?
I mean,
some of the big
it's
ones?
completely different challenges. I mean, so we, the first 5 years, we were trying to prove a business model, trying to prove that we could, build a business and a service that had a need. And there was a lot of, like anything, there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of stubbing your toe and learning as you go. But you're doing it with at that time, and I'd say we still do, but a sense of urgency because, you quit your job, right? Okay,
Yeah.
And this was your job, and you're not making any income, and you had to figure out, okay, how are we going to make this work? So I think those first 5 years, we were really trying to get out and to understand where we could best support research. We had an idea. That idea really, we had to pivot multiple times in order to really kind of find where we could add value and where we could help really be a solution to accelerate research. So, and with that, I would say all the problems are simpler, right? And so it was the first time you've ever gone through some of these problems, right? And how do you hire somebody? employee handbook, right? Okay, things like that. We'd never challenge what does a real lease look like, but you name it.
And then there's the HudsonAlpha lease.
Right, and then
which
the
is
HudsonAlpha, which is
a little bit different too. So
103 pages long, right? But in all honesty, we were learning a lot there in those early days that we still lean on, but it was really kind of proving that we actually had something and that we could build a business with this kind of idea in mind. We were taking an idea and we were building a business. Yeah. The last 5 years, and I didn't I guess tell my whole story, but we ended up selling our business as a platform investment for what is a roll-up strategy, and we changed the name we bought a company called Discovery Life Sciences, and we liked their name better. I still like commercial bio, but we felt like Discovery Life Sciences was a better name, and so what we've done is we've acquired 12, 13 companies over the last 5 years, and we've grown from 70 people to now over 800 worldwide. And so the challenges have been different, right? It's been different, taking all of these entrepreneurial founded companies and putting those together. Keeping the talent, keeping the leadership, continuing to motivate folks to say, okay, let's together we can build something that's better and can really better support research. And so that 1 + 1 is a whole lot more than 2. But to actually execute on that is a whole different challenge, right? I mentioned hiring folks, hiring at scale. If you're trying to grow from 20% a year, do you have to grow 20% of your workforce, and trying to grow from 800 and now 160 people in a 12-month time period? Not that that's what we're trying to do, but I'm just trying to give an example. That's a different scale, and also the challenges with folks who live in 29 states and in 14 other countries. And so those are just different challenges, but they're fun challenges. And I think there's a lot of similarities in those first 5 years from the last 5 years, is that we're continuing to learn, we're continuing to stub our toe along the way, but we continue to believe that what we do matters, and we're still having a lot of fun doing it.
So on the M&A side, and you've got, I'll count you as 2 and 1 right now for Discovery. We've got 13, and I don't know if this is easier or harder with, I can't see anybody.
I'm just glad you're in the spotlight.
I can't see anybody in the audience. I was trying to look over here.
And it's going to hit.
At some point it'll shift.
We're going to get off the stage before it hits.
Right. But we've had 13 transactions out of this building over the last 15 years, or out of this campus, let me say it that way. And 2 of them are with AGI and Rob, and 1 so far is with Marshall. For the companies that are here, and maybe for the panelists that might be coming up, or 2 of them at least, how did you find that fit for the company? It sounded like you told a little bit about you were on a couple lists, and how did you get on that list, coming from Huntsville, Alabama to a coast, which is always a challenge, and then how did your team or how did your investors feel of, wait a minute, this is going to change a great deal? Because especially with the research genetics story, that was very good, but then also it had its challenges and some of the pain points. So how did y'all deal with investors, teams, others? Rob, we'll start with you.
So first of all, how we got on GE's list was simply we were doing a collaboration with them. So one way you get on somebody's list is you work with people. Yep. And if you work with people, then they decide that it makes more sense for what you have to be theirs. But I cannot speak enough about how supportive my investors were of this, and the patience they had. And you pointed out that this happened in 2009. Well, this process began in 2008, and what did we have in 2008? The banking crisis. Right. So it made it just that much more of a challenge. And so when it came time for me to figure out how we were going to, basically sell the company, because we felt we'd taken the research to a certain point, and now it needed to have more funding than we could do on our own. you know, I decided to bring in some investor bankers. I do what I always do whenever I have a tough decision. I just copy Brian Pollock and Troy Moore, and went and got their investment bankers, and still work with them today. They were actually very good. They're a very small boutique company that really likes companies around here, and I think they'll probably working with other companies I don't know about because
they've had 3 or 4 here, I think.
Yeah, so they've
talked to
been
many
really
more
good.
than that. So
Yeah. So found them, and they were just relentless. They just went company by company by company until we found Clariant, and then they continued to work that deal. But the deal got, I mean, with the markets crashing, the deal just ended up being so complicated. And, you know, we ended up with something that was not, you know, you say it's 2 acquisitions, and it was, but what we were selling the investors was the win is not on this first acquisition with Clariant. The win is when we get bought by another company. And again, we were expecting it to be 2 years. That was our plan. It turned out to be 1 year. But that was, you know, we just really had to say, we need another year. We need another 2 years of patience, you know, and we need trust, and we got it. And it was amazing, so.
And for the first probably, I don't know how many months, I didn't really know Rob, but I only saw him with a phone in his ear, pacing, just kind of this loop from second floor down and the first floor. Before everybody had AirPods and things like that, always the phone in his ear, pacing and talking on the phone. And this was all during that time period. So
yeah,
lots of it.
I watched him.
I know, you're right here.
He's
That's right.
just, you know, kind of wearing out a path.
Truly,
right?
truly.
Yeah.
So what about you? Same question?
Well, you know, I guess starting, we had been very, I love telling this story, but when we were just starting out, we needed capital, and we tried to self-fund for as long as possible, meaning we, you know, didn't pay ourselves, right? You know, and you know, beg, steal, to borrow to try to figure out how you're going to, you know, figure things out. But we decided to raise capital, and I'd say first is somebody says, you need to meet Lonnie McMillan, right? And we're like, okay, you know, sounds great. I've met him once, so we'll go meet Lonnie, and we were trying to raise capital, and I remember it was a 14-page memo, okay, and sent it to him, and he responds back and says, sure, let's, you know, I'll meet you in 2 weeks. And so we went over to Adtran, okay, and met with Lonnie. And 45 minutes later, he, you know, says, okay, and he pulls out a checkbook. He says, okay, well, you know, so what was the amount again? You know, and he tries to write a personal check, you know, for the entire investment round. And I was like, well, like we haven't talked about valuation or structure or anything. He's like, that's okay. Just go talk to my attorney, John Wynn, and you all figure that out, right? But that trust, right, I think really was important. I mean, we took that as we were being good stewards of that trust, right, of that capital, that faith in us. And that was the only capital we raised. And we were very fortunate. We were a business that was different. Rob's was a R&D, right, trying to build something. We were a service business, so we had to, you know, we had to generate revenue, and the idea was this was not an R&D shop. We had to, you know, create income. And so, but through it all, I would always come back to Lonnie and say, listen, how are we doing? Are you okay? Do you want to stay in? And just thinking that he invested in us, and at some point he's expecting a return, right? And it was really it was a, you know, investment without an expectation of timeline or of on return. You know,
Well, I think the way you said it, he was investing in us.
in us,
And it was the two of you.
It was-
Probably like he did with Brian and Troy.
Yeah.
And he saw that, I mean, this is I feel very fortunate to have known him a little bit, and it was, he liked teams and he invested in people.
Yeah.
Whether it was, I guess, maybe his experience with he and Mark, and then two of y'all and others. I mean, that seemed to be his thing.
He said that.
To a certain
he liked
degree.
teams of, he liked when there was more than one, right? You know, whether it was, you know, Rob and Doug, or Luke and myself, but it was from, you know, Mark and Lonnie, right? And that was a important attribute. And I was like, wow, I'm glad, you know, there's two of us. But I guess I share that story because one, I'll never forget it, right? It was a foundational story for us. it helped us really springboard us and gave us conviction that we could really build a business. We could actually do this. But it also, we, in the back of our mind, we said, listen, we have to provide a return. And even though I'd come back to him every year and say, how are you feeling? Do we need to think about an exit or a sale? He'd say, no, you just keep going. You're doing the right thing. But at some point, we got to a point, first of all, if you build a business to sell it, you're never going to sell it. We were building a business because we enjoyed building a business. We were having fun. We felt like what we were doing was important, and there was a culture and a soul to it, right? But we felt like we had to be a good steward of this trust and this capital, right? And so there was an opportunity here where we had gotten to a point where the business was growing, but we wanted the next mountain to climb. And what we felt that next mountain was, it was a very fragmented industry. And so we said, listen, being ex-bankers, let's go and build, we're a platform business, let's go and consolidate our competition. We know them. There are a lot of good companies here. They do different parts of our industry. And together we think we can be a whole lot more than just us, right? So that was really, I think, the impetus to actually do something, right? To actually sell the business was two things. One, I wanted to make sure that we had returned Lonnie's trust and that he had a good return on that trust. And two, we felt like there was a market opportunity that was ripe and we couldn't pass up. Now, how we went about that process was different. Being kind of ex-bankers, we said, we don't need to hire a banker, right? Okay, we can run our own process. And that's what we did. We ended up, we had been approached by many private equity groups and companies. We started our own kind of internal process, really without a timeline in mind. And we were very fortunate to find a partner like Water Street Healthcare Partners. Their healthcare, middle market, private equity group has a great track record, but really we felt like they would be the right partners for us for growth. What they brought to the table wasn't just capital, but also expertise. And so we knew we needed that because just as we had started the business and grown it, we had never done what was next, what we saw on the horizon, and they had. And so so that's what really we've been up to for the last 5 years. But that's kind of that decision point, right, of why we did it, and I guess how.
Yep. So last question from me. What is the headline that you'd like to see in 3 years? That can be company, that can be HudsonAlpha, that can be World Series for all that matter, but maybe hone it more towards the topic for the day. But what would you like to see happening in 3 years or have happened in 3 years?
I think we're going to be similar here, but I won't say that because you'll surprise me. But why do we do this, right? We're here to find cures, right? To bring better drugs and better diagnostics to the patients that need them. So any headline I'd like to see is something about, there has been a cure. We've made progress, right? In whether it is in, cancer or Alzheimer's, or you fill in the blank, right? There are many challenges out there. That's the reason we do what we do. That's the reason this facility exists. That's the reason the people are in it. We're trying to advance science. We're trying to advance research. And we're doing it, what we say is because patients are waiting. And because of that, there's an urgency in what we do. And so any headline, I think, has to be around advancing healthcare solutions in patient care.
Got it. Rob?
Yeah, you're right. They're similar. I'd be a little more specific in my answer. Having worked now, 25 years, in truly personalized medicine, and truly trying to come up with tests that say you qualify for this drug, you don't qualify for this drug, here's another alternative. I would like to see that much more strongly embraced by the community. For 25 years, I've been told that's what we're doing, and I think if you get a general speech, that's what, you'll hear that that's what we're doing, but we have not taken that nearly as far as we can. And with the current product I'm working with, people say, who's your biggest competition? And I say, well, it's the biomarker group in the pharma companies, because if they use our test, why do they have a biomarker group? so we have to fight this sort of mentality of not invented here or it's not good. Do we really want one now? And in the back of the mind, I hate to say it, but numerous drug companies are always saying a good biomarker cuts our market. And so I want to see more embrace of that, because I actually think ultimately expands their market. It may cut it in lung cancer, but you will suddenly open up breast cancer. Or, ultimately those decisions, far-reaching, end up being a very strong, truly can be a win-win for everyone. But we're still at a point where a lot of the community is scared of that first step. So 3 years from now, we are fully embracing personalized medicine in this country.
Very good. All right. One or two questions. I don't want to get the other panelists that have been patiently waiting down here. Any questions? I'll start with Alex Kate, and Alex is the Director of Entrepreneurship here at HudsonAlpha and been doing a fine job for many years. And I'll give him the first question.
Yeah, thank you.
He had a handful of things that I was going to be out of time with, so we're teaming up here.
So one question for the both of you, if you don't mind. What piece of advice would you give your younger self? So when you were starting out the company, and now that you've been on the back end of either an exit or a merger, and all that's gone on in the last years, what piece of advice would you give yourself? So.
It's actually interesting. I would say it's actually something I am doing. My later self is doing this. If you really think that you have at some point are going to need to be acquired, and if you're a pure R&D company, which, as he pointed out, we were, you have to have that somehow as your goal. Turns out, don't bring in an investment banker when you want to sell. Bring them in much earlier, because they are the ones who can teach you how to build a company that is attractive to people. I mean, you got to find the right ones. There's a lot that I would not do, but if you feel you found the right one, and we felt we did, bring them in early so that you can get advice on what makes your company marketable.
Yeah, so, wow, I got a lot of lessons I would pass. I wish I could just pass back. Right? But I think there was and it sounds so simple, but there was an aha moment for us, and we were doing this, but we weren't doing this as a kind of a systematic way, is listen to your customer, right? Listen to the client, to the scientist. We were trying to provide a service to the scientific community, and we were doing research ourselves. We were doing it, again, behind a screen, as opposed to getting out and talking to them and saying, okay, where are your pain points? How can we help? So, this whole idea about looking for problems and bringing solutions, right? But making that really a more systematic part of the business, because I think we would have made different mistakes, right? We didn't say fewer mistakes. We made different mistakes. But I think that you get better aligned for the industry. You understand where you need to put your time and your investments and your talent. And so that would have been one of the things I would certainly have wished I'd passed back, because it took me a while to really learn that.
Got it. One other question? Oh, right here.
I'm going to ask for a stock market tip. I own stock in J&J, Johnson & Johnson. I own stock in Merck, and recently the GE Medical is a result of a spinoff. Where would you suggest I invest?
I'd say that's a better question than I've asked all night. So
Yeah. I don't see Merck going anywhere except up for the future. I think J&J is strong there as well. J&J is good because they actually partner. When I talked about companion diagnostics, they actually partner right out of the gate with their drug company. So I feel strongly about those two. I don't think Merck's going anywhere right now based on what they're doing with what they have on the market and what's coming up.
Well, listen, they're great companies. They're also clients, right? So but what you know, you talked about just a couple of one of the strongest companies and leaders in the industry. So I think if you believe that biomedical research is going to continue to grow, right, and that healthcare is going to continue to be a need, then you're in the right spot.
Yeah.
I want to make one plug here for your education program and also make a proud dad comment. My daughter was part of the first biotrain ever here. And now Dr. Kylie Seitz is a member of faculty at the European Molecular Biology Laboratories. There are 6 facilities around Europe. She's at the Heidelberg, Germany one. And in a week, she will become more or less the field general for the largest environmental project ever, which is called TREC, Traversing European Coastlines. And it's, again, the largest ever biotechnology environmental project done. And so your education program is, in fact, producing leaders for tomorrow.
They absolutely are. Yeah. And I'm not sure who else it's been interesting from that first class, the education spectrum that Kelly East now runs and Neil Lamb prior to her. They've built something that is the workforce for us as well as the workforce for many others. People that extracted DNA in the 7th grade 15 years ago are now working in this building and working in other places all over the world. Right. So kudos to them as well.
I think, this is, I know this is an associate company panel and so forth, but that's really the environment, that we're talking about. The combination of the companies, the educators, and the science, and bringing all those together, and the power, it's been incredible to see, right? And so frankly, it's been just been an honor to be a part of for, I know, both of us for the last 15 years.
Well, I'm not going to step on that. So, Rob, Marshall, thank you all very much for being here. We're going to swap out real quick. Okay, with these 3, they've come to HudsonAlpha in different stages, different times in their pathway as an entrepreneur or as a business. And so let me welcome, to my left, Rebecca Vaught from Van Haren, Vincent Heron from CFD, who's still on the campus. We had this debate or this conversation the other day. And then Peggy Salmon to Vincent's left. And with these, let me start with Vincent. CFD was founded in 1987 as basically a space and defense company. And then a handful of years later, they started spinning technology out, spinning companies out. And again, as we saw on the panel earlier, they were one of the first companies here when it opened. So CFD had a handful of people here, and then they've grown, and now they still have a presence here, and then are on our campus, but kind of annexed part of our campus here next door. And Vincent started 3 or 4 years after CFD started, but in '91, but has been driving their technology and intellectual property commercialization for all those many years, basically. And 2 of those companies have spun out of CFD, are part of our Navigate Mentor program, and so we're very happy that he's here with us tonight. Peggy Salmon, all the way on the edge here. She has a very interesting pathway to HudsonAlpha, and we'll touch base on that a little bit. But she is a serial tech entrepreneur, and she is the CEO of Gene Capture here on the 3rd floor. And she founded Gene Capture with Krishnan Chatur, who was a University of Alabama in Huntsville professor. So again, a different direction here. And then with Rebecca on my immediate left, Huntsville native, has been in different parts of the country and over the last, 10, 15 years, but decided to be here in Huntsville to launch her company, Van Haren. And so there's a lot of things that I think we want to touch base on this, but let me, with that all as the background, Peggy, let me start with you on the pathway to get here, and then how did you decide to start a company here with Krishnan a number of years ago?
Well, it is an interesting journey. I've always liked the high-tech startup side of business. I just love that startup, starting with nothing and building it into something that's never been done before. So to me, I respect the skills that are needed to bring a business into long levels of maturity, but I just love that startup phase. So I was involved in 2 other startups in Huntsville, both with another team, one in environmental sensing and one in wireless technology. And after both of those events, my family was fortunate to have a 1-year assignment in Australia. And when we came back, HudsonAlpha was just getting started, and I was part of something that some of you might remember called PBR, Partnership for Biotechnology Research. And when I was there, I met several scientists who were wanting to start a company or develop a product. So I offered to help them with business plans and financing strategies, and one of the people I met was Krishnan Chatur, and I just thought it was such a great idea. I read his patent, and I thought this could have such a huge impact on healthcare in rapid infection detection. So I told Krishnan, I'm happy to co-found this with you if you want, and he said, great, let's do it together. He was already had a cubicle at HudsonAlpha, so I sort of lucked into the HudsonAlpha. That wasn't a decision. I was very fortunate to just be dragged along.
We had 2 UAH professors
Yeah.
on the 3rd floor for a while, or still do actually, so very good. The product that Gene Capture has, it's from a utility standpoint, from a benefit standpoint, you've got both soldiers and the agriculture and farming community that can both benefit, which is a somewhat uncommon pairing for a specific product. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's very fortunate just when I look at how we've financed the company. So the great idea that Krishnan and his team had is rapid infection detection. And so I'm actually holding a little cartridge here that we've developed. So the goal here is that we could take a sample, a raw sample, so let's say urine, blood, swab, and within about 45 minutes, we can capture the pathogens out of that sample, break open the cells, find the RNA, fragment the RNA, and bring all of that over a little kind of bingo card microarray to figure out which pathogen is that. So it's very different than the typical way that this happens today. Today you go to a doctor's office, your sample is sent to a lab, and there's a lot of enzymes and work that has to go into it. It's a really different concept. And our about 5 years into our, I liked Rob's 5-year plan, about 5 years into our 5-year plan, we met the folks at Department of Defense who said, we're looking for a rapid infection detection system that has no power requirements, that can go what they called far forward. And so we applied for that grant and won it, and that was the beginning of a really successful run of government contracts, and our customers right now are government development funds. So it's hard when you're developing a product to have customers, but we do. And so we've been able to match almost dollar for dollar non-dilutive government funding with personal private funding. So there's kind of an obvious answer for what the warfighter needs, which is rapid information, because they're in areas where you don't know what you could be exposed to. And in the last year or so, we have learned of applications for animal pathogens and plant pathogens that are impacting food security or food production. And really, it's the same technology. Just get that sample, look for pathogens inside it. And so that's why we have this interesting Department of Defense customer base, but also healthcare and agricultural science. And I know the big message a lot of small companies are given is you've got to focus, don't have too many balls in the air. But I think our focus is the platform. We like having a lot of balls in the air for which is going to land first, which one will go the longest. And so that's why we have that interesting customer variety.
And not just on the government side, but you also have Innovate Alabama, which I mentioned earlier, as you've been working to leverage those government dollars with the supplemental dollars from Innovate Alabama. And then you're 1 or 2 or an all-star winner of Launchpad, I think. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but you've won it a couple of times in kind of the all-star game, and then you won that too. So kudos for you.
We're very happy to be part of Alabama.
Yes,
Alabama has been very good, and just recently, so last night we just learned, and you had heard Cynthia Crutchfield being introduced earlier, we just won a match grant, which means if you been successful winning a government grant and then compete again for a match grant from Alabama. And this is a really highly leveraged one for us because we're going to take an animal pathogen and add it to the panel. And so we'll be working with other institutions in Alabama. But on a previous match grant, we started looking at plant pathogens, and we're working with the Plant Science Center here at HudsonAlpha. And you know, you've heard a lot about this tonight. I'll just echo it again. It's the collaboration that really, really makes a difference. So these kind of things don't happen when you're all by yourself in a little office someplace, but if you're in a cluster with business people and scientists, that's when the sparks start to happen. And that's the fun part.
So let me turn to Rebecca with hopefully a little bit of the same. You wanted to be around this kind of crowd, but you are working in industry and research jobs for 10 plus years, and then you and your co-founders started Van Haren, and then you chose to come back to North Alabama to start your company. So tell me about how the stops along the way, but then also why you stopped moving and stayed here.
We're still very much on a forward velocity,
Good,
but
good.
yeah, hopefully still within the campus of HudsonAlpha. So so I'm from here originally. I'm from Limestone County. I'm from Coxie, Alabama, if you guys know where that's at. I just don't have the thick Southern accent, but don't let it fool you. And so, yeah, so I've known what HudsonAlpha was growing up. For us in the rural community, it was like the BioTrain internship might as well have been like your chance to go like on the space shuttle, you know what I mean? So I did apply for BioTrain, and I was denied, and so then I went on a 15-year journey to end up back at HudsonAlpha.
Okay.
No, just kidding.
I'm glad you made it back.
No, that's not what happened, but I'm glad that it ended up this way. So bachelor's molecular cell microbial biology at Auburn, did 3.5 years of undergraduate research in evolutionary genetics, stayed on doing evolutionary genetics for my PhD in a different field. Did that at Monash University, which is in Melbourne, Australia. Had the idea for our main technology at the company when I was in my second year of graduate school. I was going through a very intense PhD, and at that time, that experience starting a biotech company didn't seem that crazy after that, and so then I decided when I finished my PhD I was going to start the company. So finished my PhD, immigrated back to the United States, and I started the company about 4 months later. I was very lucky, so the bachelor's degree that I did at Auburn, we started 149 and we graduated 8, and 5 of that 8 were in Houston, Texas, doing biotech in the Texas Medical Center. And so I had been like doing evolutionary genetics in Australia. I didn't know anything about biotechnology. I just knew that we had this idea for this cool technology, and they were like, come to Houston, basically. So I went to Houston. I was in an accelerator program there in the Texas Medical Center, filed the LLC. We're now a C Corp on February 14th, 2020. And then on March 14th, 2020, that's when the world shut down. Right. So great timing. And then the Texas Medical Center, for those of you that don't know, there's 22 hospitals and universities there. So as far as like a COVID epicenter and things being incredibly scary, that's kind of the environment that I was thrust within. And so at that time, we didn't have any supporting data for our platform. It was just an idea. We were basically in an accelerator program just pitching what the technology could be. And then once the world shut down, we realized that we needed to be helping produce vaccines. So just to step back a little bit, so our main technology, we have the only platform on the planet that can determine optimal macro and micronutrients from genetic data. So that's a big mouthful to say that we have a very powerful precision nutrition platform. So this is incredibly important for a lot of the things that folks have mentioned here tonight, because all cells and organisms need fuel. They need nutrients just like you do. And so a lot of the methods for culturing various organisms, cell types, tissue types, even plants, even humans, is incredibly outdated. And so if you can actually look at genomic information and just ask that cell, tissue, organism, plant, what do you need to be eating? And then give it that, this optimizes a lot of different processes. So one of the applications that it can be used for is vaccine production. So if you optimize how those cells are harnessed and fueled, you optimize their biology, you optimize the product that you're making. So you can make a COVID-19 vaccine better, faster, and cheaper. And so that's what we did. And so we got to work. We built a home lab in Houston, and we found a vaccine producer in Canada that had they were a small startup company, but they actually had a contract to be one of the thing about Commonwealth countries. So they have a big focus on using their own technology. So they had a contract, and they were going to be one of the main vaccine producers within Canada, but they were a tiny startup. And so we were like, that company's going to need some help. So we contacted them. We did a bunch of pilot studies. They were like, this is great. We showed we could increase growth. We showed we could, improve their bioprocess, decrease cost 99%. And they were like, this is great, but we've actually never done a submission to the FDA before, and we don't know how we're going to get our own vaccine through. We especially don't know how we're going to wrap your culture media into this. So they were like, catch you next pandemic. And so then we were in this home lab in Houston, and I promise I'll wrap it up. But to figure out how we ended up at HudsonAlpha, we have to go around the world. And so then I was like, well, where are we going to go? And I was like, well, I'm from Huntsville. We got HudsonAlpha there. Let's see if there's any companies working on vaccines. And so we just started sending emails, and it turns out, so Foresight Biosciences, if any of you guys are familiar, they do a lot of very high-tech enzyme recombinant protein development up on the 4th floor, and they had an RBD candidate at that point. And so the idea was that they were going to produce this RBD either for research purposes or for a vaccine in other areas, and they needed somebody to develop their culture media. And so they said, we've got 50 square feet of lab space, so come on and we'll put you in that 50 square feet. They didn't really even ask any questions. I was like, man, I feel like they should have been more like discerning. I just sent them like 2 graphs of data. Man, they really need some culture media. So I packed up the home lab and we came to HudsonAlpha, and I've been in that 50 square feet ever since. That's right. So.
But you've got, you're talking about more on the pharma and the therapeutic side, but you do have the ability to move into ag tech and food tech and just other ag side. I said, that's what's interesting with both of your companies, because you do have the utility or the broad utility for both. So very, very good. That's right. So let me turn to Vincent. He's got the fun and rewarding, and I can only imagine how challenging it is to basically run an intrapreneur program with multiple startups and the ideas that come with them and then the people that come with them. CFD is one of the few that I'm aware of, at least regionally, that has been focused on having your people, CFD's people, move technologies out. And it's a structured, I'm not sure how structured every day, but it's a very structured program, and it's a really remarkable thing that they've done. And 2-3 of those companies are here. They've gone through programs that we run on the HudsonAlpha side. So tell us a little bit about your work at kind of working with all the startups.
Yeah. So in general, we are basically a government contractor, like very many other companies here in Huntsville, Alabama. Originally, we were really focused on aerospace and defense applications, but as part of that work, we started building a whole series of technologies, and it's wide-ranging, so not just bio. Could anywhere go from fixing wind tunnels in Tullahoma, building new wind facilities in Alabama and Hollywood, to bio applications, and we're the most excited on the bio applications. And so we have made, as a company, we have made this transition from kind of a pure play in aerospace and a government contractor to more and more bio. And 15 years ago, when HudsonAlpha came around and we had this very tiny bio group, there was this great desire by those folks, hey, we want to be part of HudsonAlpha. And we had this big need for lab space, and it was very hard to do. We were on wind drive at that point. We had a little bit of a small facility in the basement, but it was just very tough to do. And so that's how it started. Basically, 7-8 folks came over, and they were here for, I would say, 7-8 years, and then because of all its success, and we like the environment, and we like the interaction with all the fellow other companies, we moved the whole company over here. And at that point, we were probably around 100 people. We were in the 701 building, so we moved the whole thing over. And long story short, you start growing and growing, and it takes more and more space. And so we started to grow out of that space, and we got the building here behind Jackson Center, a 3-story building. That's what we're doing. And then, so the challenge with the company is, and the business model that we have, is that we're primarily government contractor, and now we have all those technologies. And as a company, we have this great desire to do something with those. Don't let it sit on the shelf. Really do something with it. It's where the rubber hits the road. We want to make an impact on society, and the only way to do it is not just for research sake. It's really to spin it off, spin it out, or license the technology. So along this whole process, we have generated, let's say, 100 patents and stuff like that in various technologies. So we license those patents. And then, of course, we try to spin out companies and to create new products. And indeed, they go from aerospace to weather prediction to, the focus seems to be on bio. And so we have a great time and fun with all those things, yeah. But it is a big challenge because, see, once you have a single focus as a company, it makes it easier, and we don't have that. See, I have probably 5, 6, 7 spin-outs, and then I have more coming down the pipeline, and we're very, So it is a very difficult thing, and you try to get engineers and scientists, you try to make them run those applications and products. So that's where the education part comes in. So you have to train them, and that's why we run our entrepreneur program. And we work with HudsonAlpha. So we send the folks, so first we do our entrepreneur program. So we teach them about lean business startups and things like that. We teach them a little bit the nomenclature, minimal viable product and things. And then we send them to Generator, let's say to the G-Beta program. Generator's working with you guys. We were some of the first to work with them. And then we started more and more working with the HudsonAlpha Navigate program. So they have been very helpful. You get 3 mentors assigned to you, and they kind of help you think how to formulate this product and how to go about it. And it's just a great environment to be in. So that has been successful over the past. So it's work in progress, but we have a lot of fun at it, and it's exciting. So yeah.
I think one of the things is when you have your companies going through that, it's not just the mentoring, and it's not just the learning about the lean startup guide and things like that, but it's truly a Shark Tank situation too. I've been a judge a couple of times, and the technologies have ranged, across, anything from, I'll just go with fashion to safety in sports and everything in between, based on technology that's already been developed, and now you're looking for other applications. But you do get that part of, okay, I need to stand up, I've got to make the pitch, and somebody is judging me for it, and putting a rank in order, which has got to be challenging for people that...
And what we have going for us is that most of those technologies, they are not just ideas or just developed from scratch. Typically, those were developed, let's say, in the SBIR program. And so that typically means that, they're a little bit more mature. They may have $1 million or $2 million or sometimes $4 million worth of non-dilutive funding. And then based on that, we kind of start to assess, what would be a minimal viable product and how to spin it out and take it to market. So, but it's interesting, and you always learn new things. So it's a big challenge as a company to be that diverse and that wide, and all those industries have their own requirements and federal regulations, and so we're still learning. But so far so good.
Well, I think we've, from an economic development side, we've been fortunate to, whether it's with Marshall and Rob or the 3 of y'all, we've learned a great deal from the entrepreneur side and the recruitment side of how things need to be formulated. I think a lot of the things that we do, whether that's just kind of support the entrepreneur program to kind of promote some of the things that are happening on the state level, whether it's with the SBIR match or the Launchpad program, but each of y'all in a different way are part of the Navigate Mentor program. So Peggy, when we started talking about launching a mentor program, she was undecided if she wanted to be a mentor, which is kind of what I thought, like of course that's what Peggy needs to be. She wanted to be on the other side. She wanted to have the group around her. But we convinced her to be part of the mentor group. But then with Rebecca, she's on the mentee side. And I think she's got a good team around her now. And then at least 2 of the groups that have come out of CFD have been part of the mentor program. And those are things that we are learning how to help the next ones that are coming through based on a lot of the...
And that's how I see my role in the company too. So when the folks spin out, they may go with the company, they may actually stay at CFD Research. But each and every experience is unique oftentimes. But what happens is we get more and more experience in those spin-outs, and we're kind of building this knowledge. And maybe from so many years ago we were a little bit naive to, well, we have a little bit of sense what we're doing nowadays.
Sure.
And so the hardest part for us is, especially if the team, those are typically scientists and engineers, if they don't feel like going with the product. And to get venture capital is not easy. So besides the product and the technology, they look at the team. And so we like sometimes venture studio programs where as part of this whole process, we hire a new CEO for the product and basically, start a whole new company. So even the technical team may not fully move over and transfer.
And that's what just happened over the last couple of months with TerraVista?
TerraVista, yeah. So we are very excited about that. It's was an NIH project, SBIR program. Got $2 million worth of funding for it, vestibular rehabilitation for elderly patients and balance programs. And we have been working for the last 2-3 years to try to spin that out. And so we had, we talked to many folks. So we participated in HudsonAlpha Navigate program and run into, with help from HudsonAlpha, there again, in one of the venture capital companies in Otto Left Ventures in Nashville. And, they like the product. And basically we have a new spin-off and venture capital. We hired a CEO and they're going to town. So it's doing well, I think. So we have some other spin-offs too. So Cementicard is a cyber product. It's a cyber product. And actually it's called Cementicard. It's a joint venture with Generator. And there too I have to acknowledge. So Cementicard won the matching funding as well this morning, at least that we were aware of. So, and then we have SimVivo, and SimVivo was already spun out maybe 7 years ago. They are located in this building. And then, we have several more coming down the pipeline. So POC Therapeutics, drug discovery. We have Harmony Diagnostics, so we're working on, spinning those out, and most likely those 2, putting them back in here somewhere.
Right.
So we're excited about that, and, keep on working and keep on, just spinning it out.
And hopefully from a HudsonAlpha standpoint, that's the model that we see with a lot of the other defense space contractors here in town. That I like talking about the CFD story just to encourage others to, if you've already got this technology working, it's already there, don't leave it on the shelf.
Don't leave it on the shelf. It's a waste. We feel we have this mandate to take it to market, and so we're trying our best, at least from our point of view, to really, make it work and really spin it out, or license the technologies, or transition to the DoD. See, it's all good, but you have to be very active on all those 3 areas.
Got it. So y'all both, or the 3 of y'all came in at different areas. With Rob and Marshall, they were the co-founders of their companies. What's probably the nugget, the golden nugget that you would pass along to somebody that approaches you, and I'll start with Rebecca, of starting a company, starting a biotech company in this time?
Yeah, well, right now is a challenging time.
Right.
So I would first tell them that, buckle up. But the second thing that I would say is that you can do it. You can absolutely do it. I shared a little bit of our story. We're not quite as highly capitalized as CFD. So we're like the scrappy, garage band, bootstrapped biotech startup, at least until the past month or so. So we're closing in on our seed round right now. But we ran the company, we bootstrapped it, just $200 a month for a year and a half until we hit revenue. And then we ran on that revenue until we started off as a services company, basically trying to do custom nutrient optimization with our platform. And now what we're trying to do is develop product suites based on that platform and based on other technologies that we've created, now trying to commercialize to complement the core technology and to also solve a lot of other problems. So that's what happens when you solve one problem for your clients. They're like, hey, what about this thing? And then we're like, can we make that a product? Might as well. And so we've got a very active...
Knowing the customer, knowing your client, kind of like what Marshall was saying, listening to what they're saying as well.
Yeah, okay. That's right. So I'd say, don't be scared. Just dive in and you can do it. And nobody else knows what they're doing either. That's the most important thing to know.
Starting it off, okay. Vincent, with multiple startups, what's your nugget of advice?
Get your team together. So people have very good ideas about the product, about the technology, especially where I'm sitting. We have a company full of scientists and PhDs and everything, but the team and a multidisciplinary team and getting the folks that come up with the ideas, that bring up the technologies and develop them. Guys, you have to realize the team, the traction that you need to have. And do you really want to be a CEO of that company, or would you be better off being the CTO or something else? Or so it's definitely a whole different skill set. And for people, it's good not to underestimate. And it really holds you back on trying to find funding if you don't eye well as a team. So it has to be there. It cannot just be a bunch of techies. They have to have that confidence that the company will go further, and that it's a multidisciplinary team, not just some technical folks.
And you're working on a product as opposed to a project type of thing. So
absolutely, yeah. So we're trying to educate them, and we're trying to work with them, and but it's all good. I think they start to realize sometimes that initially they have that, I want to be entrepreneur and I want to be a CEO and this and that, and when push comes to shove, maybe somebody else may be better at it than you as a person. Yeah.
Got it. Peggy?
I think the advice I would give is make sure you identify who is going to want to buy what you're working on. Is there really a market for it? And then I would say, and this is, shout out to HudsonAlpha, don't be alone. You've got to be in a cluster of some kind that has like-minded efforts so that you can take advantage of the generous spirit that is here. Just don't do it alone. And there's a lot of naysayers out there, and you just got to push on through.
Well, this is a HudsonAlpha panel, so I'll go back to that a little bit. Y'all all chose to be here, not just tonight, but your companies. What are some of the things we've talked about? Navigate, we've talked about just the ecosystem. Are there other things that would, kind of going back to that, encouraging other startups to jump in, to do those things? What else at HudsonAlpha that y'all have experienced that we should do more of to help other startups? Peggy, I'll start with you.
I think there is a strong community between CEOs of companies in HudsonAlpha, and we don't have a lot of structured interaction, but we have a lot of informal interaction, and it's very helpful to connect with someone else who may have similar issues, capital raising, personnel issues, and being able to just share that data, let your hair down with somebody else who's in the same boat is very, very helpful. And then I'd say another really big benefit here is recruiting. So when you're looking for somebody and your address is HudsonAlpha, it is a huge door opener. So the being able to bring in new employees and top-notch employees and have them, they'll often say, I wanted to work at HudsonAlpha. Okay, you're the company, but I really wanted to be in the HudsonAlpha environment. So that is a big, big benefit.
Got it. Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start. You guys have been, our secret weapon. We couldn't have done it up until this point without, that address upstairs and the help and the resources that are here, both human and, we have access to every piece of equipment we could possibly need. And so we've been able to run lean, mean, and wide open for the past 3 years. And so I tell, I went to Silicon Valley recently for a conference, the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to visit a lot of these Y Combinator, backed by some of these very fancy VC firms that you've heard of, and I'm like, this is your lab space? Well, I'm glad we're in Alabama. I can do way more. I can do more on a Tuesday afternoon than you guys can do in 2 weeks. So yeah, it's been incredible to be here. Just just to have this army behind us with capabilities and humans. But I think if you could do anything else, it'd be more things like this. Getting together. This has been great. Not to ding it, we've been in COVID for 2 years, but true. Yeah, it's just nice to mingle and see people on the balconies again and get together.
Hopefully we'll do more of not just this, but more as we move south. Yeah. And with the work that we're doing in the Wiregrass, and there's plenty of collaborations, whether it's in Birmingham or in Auburn or in Mobile. Hopefully we can stretch this into, and I know lots of y'all are already doing statewide work, and so hopefully we can keep this going. So, same question, Vincent?
Yeah, I think many things have already been mentioned. I mean, and we use all the facilities. I think that's my wife. I told her 6:30.
I was about to say, I think we're running a little long, so it's understandable. It's understandable.
So anyway, yeah. So we're using all the facilities. We're using all the facilities. He probably thinks I'm, who knows. But
if you want to put her on a speaker, we'll all vouch for you. You're still here, so that's fine.
Yeah, I'll put her on the microphone. So no, we're using all the facilities, and the Navigate program has been great. If we need something, we call Alex, and he will help us. And so I think the one thing that hasn't been mentioned much are the monthly meetings for the companies and the luncheons. They are always very informative, interesting speakers. We get to learn about different topics, goes anywhere from patents to who knows what.
All right, let me go take that call, and let me ask the final question of the night, which is basically the same question I asked Robin and Marshall. What's the headline, Peggy, that you'd like to see in the next 3 years?
I have a great headline for us. Alabama leads the nation in innovation.
Here we go. I'll do that. Vincent?
Yeah, so 3 years from now, so Pop Therapeutics is one of the main targets there is pancreatic cancer, and my father passed away pancreatic cancer, so I have definitely a personal interest, and I hope it goes somewhere, but it's always a high risk. Other things maybe a bit closer to home. See, I would love for one of my subsidiaries to become larger than CFD Research.
Oh, okay.
It would really, really make my day if that would ever happen. So,
very good.
Or go IPO, either way.
Very good. So, Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, I know we have one of the largest, biotech campuses, on the planet. I would love to see that headline, be coupled with even more economic development, impact, and then also more impact on, as folks were saying, on the healthcare side, on the, ag tech side, that we're just on a, a global stage, and that, when I'm on Zoom calls and I say at HudsonAlpha, people automatically know. They know right where it's at. They know a company there. They've met somebody.
Very good.
And so that we're just, we just more spotlight than ever before.
Great. All right. One question from the outside, from the audience, and then we will adjourn for the evening. Anyone? Okay, well, let me round of applause for these three and then for Rob and Marshall. Thank y'all very much for doing this.